perspective or a cheating perspective. So we're going to be providing all of that, all of the registration, the bracket management, and the scheduling and the skill-based matchups. We're going to be providing that. And then finally, one of the things is for the state tournaments, some kind of prizing or scholarship, et cetera. And part of the conversation we had with the NMAA is that there's some really, really specific rules dictated by the AIA in this case of whether it's prizing or scholarships or grants given back to the school, what's allowed to be given to winners of tournaments. So we're going to be working with the AIA to figure out exactly what that looks like. The idea is that we want to really heavily reward players that play well, that win their districts or the conferences, and then go to the state championship and win. So we want it to be a really rewarding, enriching experience while still kind of following the rules that are set by the AIA. And then as we move through the seasons, especially for the live events, all those events and the games that are played are going to be streamed on Twitch and YouTube. And we're going to get that out there. We're going to have live shoutcasting and commentating, et cetera. If the right forms are filled out, we can show the players' cams. I know there's some rules behind what is and is not allowed to be showed on TV and streams and whatever in terms of students' faces and any of their biography, et cetera. And the goal here is that we want to help them sort of build their personal brands so they can then go to colleges and say, I was on the esports club, we made it to a state tournament, here's me, here's a highlight reel of some plays that I made, this is my personal brand. So we want to empower the students to be able to create that for themselves.
Question about that.
Yep.
Since there's such a large number of games going on a Tuesday and Thursday, I'm assuming that means that not all of them could be streamed for the night. Because of that, does that mean that the school can take it on themselves to stream the games that are not streamed by you?
Yes, 100%. That's part of the. So actually, and I don't know if this applies for the AIA. Some of the conversations we had says that if we're going to stream the games online, the week-to-week competitions, we either have to stream all of them or none of them as our entity. And the part of that is that we can't play favorites. So if there weren't those rules, we might say, hey, here's the play of the week. Here's the 5-0 team versus the 4-1 team. They're about to play. They're the best that we have in this conference. We want to show them off and do an official match with shoutcasting and all the commentating and whatever. So if that's something we can do that. Or if the AIA says that that's not okay, we need to be able to not favor certain schools over others, we're going to do that too. And then that's where we can start the strategy of empowering those schools and the students who are interested in really minor amounts of production and maybe shoutcasting and whatever to go sort of take control of their content and show it as they please. So talking about the logistics of all that, the data, we've been talking quite closely with some of the developers that work at the AIA. How is the data going to work? How are we going to market this to students? Most of you all know that your students are really interested in it, but we want to kind of have the awareness campaign, make sure everyone knows about esports, make sure people realize what the really huge benefits of esports are, and maybe some of the objections they have aren't what they thought they were, et cetera. So we've got a plan behind all of that. And then this is the state tournament side as well, talking about the venues for those and some of what those live events would look like and what you can expect out of them. So one of the companies that we've been in talks with and looking to partner with is a company called AIA Esports. They own the Luxor Hotel venue that's in the Luxor Hotel. It's Esports Arena Las Vegas, and you probably see them all over Twitch if you're interested in gaming. They host all kinds of events from tournaments to charity events. They've got a full-service restaurant there. It's also a LAN gaming cafe, so any of you could walk in and pay $30 to play for 4 hours. Really great company. And what they do is they do affiliate venues that use their name, and it's a full-service esports venue. They do pop-up LAN parties where they can travel anywhere with a team and go and set up a LAN party in a hotel convention center or in a school gym or whatever we want to do. And then finally, they have their truck, which is the Big Betty, and that's the esports mobile truck. So we're kind of looking to do a combination of all of those things, whatever works for the school. If we can drive the truck around and set up some events week by week that we invite the local schools for, that's some of the things that we're really looking into. So this is one of their venues. This is what a professional esports gaming experience looks like. You can see on each team, they're separated. Their computers are on the right side and the left side up on the stage. And then you've got stands behind it. And right here, you see they've got computer setups here that anyone can come in and play. And this is the sort of event that we're looking to do, where we let anyone who's been involved in the program come, set up their computer, use computers, and then those who are actually participating in the tournament get to go up on stage and be streamed and have a crowd and et cetera. So those are the kind of experiences we're looking to deliver to these kids. And then this is the truck. This is awesome. This is really incredible. They drive this truck around. They've got all the area on top that the shoutcasters can sit on top of. There's a VIP booth up there, and they will come and set up a stage with computers, et cetera, right out of the side of the truck and put up the screen. It's really great, and we're thinking about renting this, driving it around, and putting up these pop-up events for kids to participate in. In terms of our marketing, execution, et cetera, one of the things that we're looking for, we've got a marketing firm that we're working with who's helping us develop a lot of these materials. The materials are things like, hey, here's all the studies of why esports are great, and here's what you can expect if you have an esports team. Here's some of the growth that you're going to expect, and the kids that you're going to be able to outreach to. So that's some of the material we're looking to put together. Part of that is, again, digital outreach towards kids, social media outreach for the kids that are using social media, and then that ambassador packet, which just explains, if I'm a school, why do I want to do this? Why am I interested? Why are my kids interested? Why should we be doing this, et cetera? So that's all the things that we're putting together. And then from a technology side, we're opening up APIs directly. We're going to be working with the AIA for that to help them consume some of our data that they could put up their websites for. And then we're also going to be working through Fan360 to give them that data as well to put out on their apps, et cetera. So from a school perspective, if you're a school and you want to implement the esports program onto the Legacy program and compete for the state championship tournament league, the first thing you need to do is express interest with us. And obviously everyone who's here is pretty interested in learning more. There's going to be some schools that are not here that are interested, and that's why we're trying to get all this material out so everyone just knows. Everyone knows that esports is a thing. It's going to be happening. The AIA wants it to happen. The schools want it to happen, et cetera. So that's one of the first things we need is an expression of interest directly to us. Again, once the actual season starts, the coaches, they register their team on the platform. We give them whatever information. That's a guidebook. That's kind of a shorter document of everything you'd need to know to participate. A rule book, which is really, really, really specific, game-specific rules, any of the scheduling, et cetera. Part of that is that we respond with the information that we have, again, the scheduling, the rule book, guidebook, et cetera. We initiate regular contact, and that's part of what Scott, who's not there, that's part of what Scott's going to be doing for us is kind of setting up a direct relationship between us and all of the schools with weekly, bi-weekly communications. Here's what here's what you need to be doing. Here's the link to this, et cetera. That's really tailored towards the administration and the administration figuring out what they need to do. And then again, once everyone's registered, we go and we set up the scheduling and bracketing, and we start with our inaugural season. Oh, whoops. I thought I was already on that slide. So part of what we've been talking about for the actual state tournaments and the competitions and any of the other LAN and competitive events that we want to hold is that you obviously need a venue for those things. So part of that is, again, we've talked to companies and providers. I think there's one in Phoenix that has some kind of LAN gaming setup. We talk to those companies and we say, maybe it would be a good idea to hold it there. If it's not, things like hotel convention centers, school gyms, if that's the way that we want to go, pretty much anything that has a really strong internet connection, redundant internet connection, and can provide the power is something that we'd be looking at. So we're in the process of, in Arizona, figuring out what some of those venues would look like. But just to give you an idea of where our head's at while we're going through that, those would be the ideal kinds of venues for us. So for the back half of our presentation, I want to go over some really specific questions that I know a lot of you have. We've already talked about a lot of them, but I'm just going to bring up a few of them things they may not have thought of, et cetera. So one of the big things people have asked us is, do we provide IT support? So a lot of what we're going to be doing, and again, we're going to send through that survey to all the schools just to figure out if your school even has the capability of doing esports. At that level, again, for the actual machines that you might have to buy or anything that you need to implement, we're going to be working with our providers to provide sort of packages of machines that you can buy. And then anything that's really, really, down lower level IT support, like opening ports and configuring the network and anything that goes along with that, that's where we rely on the school IT staff for that. Does anyone have any questions about IT? Good.
When are those specs going to come out?
Pretty soon that we're going to put them out. I'd say with our November release of the games and any of that other information, you would expect to get a list of specs for minimum computers, and then as we kind of finish up that relationship with the technology providers, with the resellers, that's when we're going to go and have them put together systems for us. So I'd say probably around the same time frame. Pardon?
On the network side.
On the network side, yeah. So that's going to be part of the survey. We're going to send out that survey, and part of that is we're going to figure out, do you have like a redundant connection? What's your download speed? What's your upload speed? Do you have any kind of network fluctuation over the course of the day versus the nighttime? Those are some of the questions there. So ideally, we're going to receive their surveys back from you, and we'll be able to determine if there's any issues we can immediately see versus, if we think we're good to go. We talked quite a bit about this, optimal performance. There's a lot of conversation, again, whether having a really souped up computer versus kind of a middle tier computer can really give you a competitive advantage. I would say it's just like if you've got on the football field, again, you got to show up with cleats, but we're not here to say what kind of cleats you need. If you got the new $400 cleats, you might perform better than someone who has 10-year-old cleats that are having the soles ripped up. So that's sort of our opinion on that. Again, you do need some kind of level of gaming machine to run a lot of these games, and part of that is, we want to work with the technology providers to figure out if we can provide those at a really low cost. Some of the third-party venues that we're thinking about could host many of the high schools for their week-to-week competitions. And again, if the AIA and the schools decide they want to allow this, the kids can play from home as well. So there's a lot of options of how we can make that work, and we want to work directly with the schools to make sure that there's not a school that says, you know what, we just can't do it. We can't do esports. How will cheating be dealt with? Again, we've got a very strong stance against cheating and anything of that sort. One of the big things with esports, in football, if you cheat, you get a flag. And that flag says your team loses 15 yards, and cheating has a specific rule book around that. To cheat in esports games, you actually have to actually use third-party software, or if you've got someone playing instead of you, you have to go around the rules that are developed as part of the game itself. So it takes a lot of want for you to go and cheat in a game. And this is so kind of honor-based for us. At the end of the day, if someone's playing on your account, the only way we're going to be able to investigate that is getting reports from that in the first place and going and looking at the games and things like that. It's very honor-based, and if we have kids that are cheating as a part of that, there's going to be significant suspensions, whether that's for the rest of the year or if the AIA decides that should be, a month suspension or a couple weeks suspension. But we take a very, very strong stance against cheating in any of these games.
Is the stance on third-party software, just don't use it? Like CD trackers or OPG or stuff of that nature?
Well, OPGG, I mean, that's for any games that have scouting and things like that, we'd actually heavily advise you use that because that allows you to see the history of the players you're playing against. That's why we do the roster locks before, to make sure that you're able to go effectively scout and look at what those players have been doing. So that as a third-party software is fine. If you're playing a shooting game and you got a third-party software that's making your computer aim for you, that's pretty clearly not the allowed third-party software.
Pretty game-specific on what they are.
It's game specific, and I would say anything that is something that actually affects the core gameplay, where you're in game and there's software doing something for you, that is an absolute no. If it's, hey, I'm doing statistical research or analysis pre-game, I would say there's no reason you can't use that software. Does that make sense? And if anyone has questions on the distinction for those, let me know and I can explain further. But the idea is that if you're in the middle of a game and you do something that goes outside of the bounds, or you use some software that does some work for you that you would otherwise have to do as a regular player, that wouldn't be allowed. How will software and hardware issues be dealt with during official matches? So this is a big thing. You've got 5 machines and you're in the middle of your game for the league, and someone has a Windows update, and Windows goes and pulls them out of the game, and their computer restarts, and everything just gets messed up. This is a really real scenario, and it happens. Part of this is we want to lean on the IT staff to make sure if you're using Windows that you're in game mode and things like that. But at the end of the day, if there's someone who's having one little specific hardware issue, of course, these are solved on a game-by-game basis. But if my computer randomly disconnects, you have to continue to play the game. Some games allow you to pause in the middle of that, so you could give a 5 to 10 minute pause period for that student to restart their computer and come back into the game. Others don't; they just require you to play through the match. So this will all be part of the rules that we release. It'll be on a game-by-game basis. But at the end of the day, oftentimes, if there's any really specific hardware or software issues that happen in the middle of a game, we have to side with letting the game play on. If that makes any sense. Can we reschedule a match due to conflicts? And this was sort of part of your question earlier. Again, if there's any conflicts like, hey, these 2 schools are on spring break, that would be an example of a match that we would need to reschedule to make sure that both teams can play it. If the match rescheduling is, Sarah had to go home and her mom said that she has to do homework and she's not allowed to play in her weekly match, we can't do that. So it's really on a situation-by-situation basis. I would say for extenuating circumstances, we need to do reschedules of match, and that's something that we would do a week or 2 weeks in advance. But as a game day scenario, unless a lightning storm takes down both schools' entire power, we have to side with making sure that the teams play during their scheduled time. Any restrictions of streaming and recording games to post on platforms like Facebook or Twitch, especially if we go with the idea of allowing the content to be provided by the schools and letting the schools stream and shoutcast? No, there wouldn't be, but we're definitely not looking at games that would say you're not allowed to stream our content on Twitch. So that's part of our strategy with this. Again, we want to put some of that content in the production and the shoutcasting and whatever else goes into that back into the hands of some of the students. And we would expect that they're allowed to stream those on Twitch or YouTube or however they choose to do that. Before we move on, and we have a couple slides left, that was FAQs. Are there any more pressing questions that anybody has? Stuff they've been thinking about or wanting to ask?
I still have a question about how the state tournament works.
Yeah.
You said there's going to be 8 teams in a conference.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that means at a certain level. Will there be multiple conferences at the same level if there are enough teams playing at that level?
Yeah, so the way that we're going to be doing conferencing is if you took your 50 teams and you derived an average skill level from all of those, and then you sorted them in order of highest skill level to lowest skill level, we're going to be going and putting those teams into buckets, right? So you'd imagine that everyone in your conference relatively is the same skill level. So from there, we're going to go and we're going to take, let's say, the top 2, and again, this is a tweakable setting. Of the 8 teams that are in that conference, at the end of the round robin, regular season play, we're going to take the 2 teams from each of them, and those are the 2 teams that are going to participate in the state tournament.
If you have your top level bucket,
Yep.
your best 8 teams,
Mhm.
you have 2 of them qualifying for your state tournament.
Yep.
And then you've got your lowest level bucket,
Yep.
right? You're going to take 2 of those teams, then they're going to meet in the state tournament?
Yeah.
No. They're going to play. You're going to. Again, this depends on, do we have 1,000 teams? Do we have 25 teams? Right? All of this is still yet to be determined. We want to make the state tournament more competitive, actually, right? So the idea would be, let's say you have 100 players at your platinum level, you have 100 players at your, or let's say, so 20 teams at the platinum level, 20 teams at the gold, and 20 teams at the silver. So you've got, three conferences and 3 conferences and 3 conferences, right? So you may take 3, you may take 2 from each conference and then do wild cards, right? Similar to what you do today. So we want to make the state tournament more competitive actually than the regular season. So you're not going to be playing the platinums against the silvers in the state tournament.
And, so, and again, part of that is dependent on how many schools we actually have participating. If you have a lot of schools participating, you get to go and section each of those divisions into their own state championship, just like you'd have D1 and D2 and D3, D4. So we can do something similar here. If you have less schools that are participating, you can then tweak that to say, you know, the skill differences aren't enormous. Let's seed them like you would in any regular tournament and have one knockout stage event. Does that make sense?
Most of the way there. You're all the way there.
I would say for you guys, similar to, we may sit down with AIA and we may propose something and say, well, we'd like to do it this way, and we're going to work with them to do it. Similar with you guys, we can do your state tournament however you want, right?
I'm just curious about the Arizona State tournament, because the way, and let me restate it, when you're developing your conferences, are you taking essentially the best 8, the highest average teams, and putting them in one conference?
Yes.
Yes. So you're going to have 1 or 2 teams coming out of that highest level average moving on to the state tournament.
So-
but really, in actuality, at the state tournament, you do want the best teams, which may in fact be those 8 teams that are in the top
Right.
averages.
So it may depend on a lot of factors, right? If there's 8 elite teams, right, and everybody else is below that, right? You may bring all 8 teams to the state tournament, right? It's okay. We have total flexibility today. And again, we'll learn a lot more over the next year, the next season, et cetera. But we're going to make sure that we're being as competitive as we can possibly be. And again, it goes back to, let's say for round numbers, let's say there's 24 teams in that platinum level, right? So you have 3 conferences, and that makes a lot of sense. If you only have 8 teams at the platinum level, then that's a totally different circumstance, and we would manage the state tournament appropriately, right? So all that will come out as we're gearing up for the start of the season based on the number of teams, the number of participants. This is all new, right, to all of us. So we're going to be tweaking it as we go along. The idea, though, is that we're going to have a very inclusive round-robin regular season online. We're going to be doing LAN events that are inclusive and try and get as much participation for whatever reason. Maybe they want to play other games, or we want to offer more people who can't be involved. Whatever we want to do, and then the state tournament, we will react or respond accordingly with the talent level we have and the number of teams, and then we'll work with Brian and David and those guys to make sure it's as optimal as possible.
Well, and kind of what we're expecting is, I don't want to make this sound like if there are 5 people in a team, that they're all the same skill level. We would expect this to operate kind of like the NCAA tournament, where every so often a 15 seed takes off a 2 seed, and you see more of those upsets as it goes on. So we wouldn't expect that if we're putting the top seed versus the bottom seed in the first round, you would have a situation where that top seed wins every single time. The goal is we want to make it really competitive. At the other hand, for the conferences, we want to really motivate the kids to do really well during the regular season play. If we just started picking teams one by one and saying, you get to go to the state tournament and you don't, I don't feel that would be fair the same way. So that's kind of the goal, is we want to set up the competitive environment. And if you're the team that just beats the heck out of every other team in your division, even though your public skill ranking is low, it might be because you play better as a team and maybe not as well by yourself, right? So there's a ton of factors that go into it. At the end of the day, we just want to make it really competitive and still give the incentive to play really well during the season league.
Will there then be a state championship game for each of those different levels?
Yeah.
Well, can you repeat your question before I?
So we have different
Yep.
levels, like these are our top level players, and there's however many conferences and however many teams. But then there's my low level kids who are just starting out at a game. Will they also get a state championship?
Let me answer.
Yeah.
We do whatever we want, right? Right now, the idea would be that in those levels, right, that you would play for a state championship, similar to, and I don't know how many classifications you have in Arizona now, 6? Yeah, so 6. You have 6 state champions for football, right? Colorado, they have 6 state champions for basketball. we can have as many state champions. There may be enough participation that we have 6 levels, right? You have a platinum elite, and you have a platinum, you have a gold elite, and a gold, right? So we can do whatever we want to make it as competitive and as incentivized as possible for the participants.
So if you're in the top, and I'm just using 2 for now, again, it could be 1, 2, 4, 3, whatever. If you're in the top 2 teams, even if you're at that very bottom level, if you are in the top teams of your conference, you're going to a state championship. I guess the question we're trying to solve moving forward is, do we have one state championship that encompasses all of the conferences where, you know, in the first round of that championship, the absolute bottom contenders go against the absolute top ones? Or, especially once we have the participation, can we split that into different levels where now in the knockout tournament, only the top 4, you know, conferences are playing against each other, and then the next 4, and then the next 4, and then there's a separate state championship for each, kind of like what you'd see in football, right, where you've got different divisions in your state championship.
Yeah, I would just say from the state perspective, much like when we started beach volleyball, you know, there's only enough teams to have one state championship, if you will. Now we have 2, but as we grow, as we see how many are participating, how many are registering, that's how we kind of determine. It may only be 1 to start, but it may grow to 2, it may grow to 3, but it all depends on how we grow that participation and the amount of teams that are involved.
So what you're trying to say also for you is the division levels. You might have one team in your school at Division 3, and your school might also be in Division 2 if you look at that levels too. So your school might be in multiple divisions, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Correct. Well, so the goal is actually, we want it to be that way. If you've got a school that has 2 teams, and the students who play on each team are completely separate, we don't want them to be part of the same conference because, again, if they're playing, you know, we don't have a lot of oversight over the online competitions that happen over the course of the year. You never want to give a situation where they're on a tiebreaker, and if team 1 wins this, they are now going to the state championship, and one team throws the game because of that. So we're trying to avoid as many of those situations as humanly possible.
Will it depend on like how many teams there are in each conference?
Yep.
Will that depend on like if there's like a quarter, semi, and then final, or is it like just it'll automatically have quarter, semi, final, or will there be more rounds than that, like depending on how many teams are in there?
It is entirely dependent on how many teams are participating. Once we have an idea of what that looks like, and especially the skill differential, that's where we'll say, hey, we're going to have, instead of 8 team conferences, we're going to have 6 team conferences, right, or 10 team, just as an example. That's going to be entirely based on participation and the skill differential between the bottom teams and the best.
So, forgive me, because I guess I'm a little bit confused regarding the state tournament. We're talking about in the normal matches, you know, we're going to have essentially students who are, we'll call it varsity, and students who we'll call junior varsity. They're not as skilled, right? So we're going to have we'll just say there's 2 different conferences, varsity conference, junior varsity conference.
Yep.
And there's multiple conferences at those levels, of course, because we're spending the state. So we're taking 2 kids from this conference, 2 teams, 2 teams, 2 teams, 2 teams, 2 teams, 2 teams, and the bottom conference, the junior varsity.
Yep.
Are you saying that junior varsity conference teams will be playing the varsity
Hold on.
conference teams in the state tournament? Or are they still going to be 2 separate leagues at the state tournament
So,
competing for their
if-
own?
If you can tell me the number of participants we're going to have, the number of teams, and the level of play, if you could tell me that right now, we'd give you a direct answer on it. Right.
Yeah.
So to Brian's point, right, we don't know. There's probably 40 schools represented here. I would anticipate probably another 40 will be playing, so I'd say maybe 75 to 80 schools. That may be 5 teams per school on average, right? So now we're talking 300. That gives you a much bigger cross-section on how to manage that state tournament. If we end up with 75 schools and 75 teams, that's a much smaller cross-section, and we would have to manage the state tournament, accordingly. So I get it. We all want to know exactly what we're going to be doing, but in the inaugural year, we have a lot of work to do to get us to a point where we know who's playing, how many teams are playing, and what games they want to be playing, right? Because that will impact all of this as well. So great questions. I'm not trying to diminish the enthusiasm, because the state tournament's going to be fun, and it's going to be a great experience. You saw what it looks like up here when other people have been doing it. But this is the first season, and we're very excited about it. And the thing that I think you can rest assured, based on the amount of effort that's gone in from the AIA standpoint, and they will provide the leadership on the state tournaments, because they've done it a number of times before here in the state. And as Brian just mentioned, they started beach volleyball, which they have some experience with and things like that. So we're gonna be the thought leaders, or we're gonna be pushing the envelope to make sure we get as healthy of a competition and as much competition as possible. But it'll really ultimately depend on the number of teams and the level of play of kind of each level, and the amount of enthusiasm for the esports stuff. Thank you, though.
Anyone else have questions? All right, so the last thing we have is the rollout plan, and this is just kind of what you can expect to see on a month-by-month basis. So October, we're doing the surveys and we're talking to people, trying to figure out what games everyone's playing. What's the interest level essentially for each one? Again, I told you the story of New Mexico, where they said we got 5 kids playing one game, 5 playing another, and we've got 40 Overwatch players. So there's definitely some pockets of that in Arizona. Through November, all the education, the materials, the game decisions, everything's going to be made available directly through the channel into the schools. So you will be fully equipped with information of what you can expect for registration, what you can expect for games, what you can expect from rules, etc. That's where all the documentation is going to be released. During December, registration will open up. So that's when you can start as a coach. You can go in, make your teams, invite your players to the teams, start getting everything put together. That's when we'd expect, too, that the kids would start coming into the labs and hopefully have computers by then, or if not, start grouping up in their own private Discord servers and channels and just playing games with each other. And we want that to happen everywhere already, but we want that really to be started by December. Finally, or not finally, in January, we're going to move on to exhibition matches. Through all this, we want players and teams to be scrimmaging each other. We'd also like to put on a series of exhibition matches that are similar to what the regular league play is going to look like, but won't actually count for everything. So this is sort of where we test, we make sure that the students are able to do this in the schools, that everything's going well, et cetera, and just get everyone accustomed to the competitive environment. February, official league play begins. This is where you can expect on your week-to-week basis that you're actually playing games. Results are being recorded. The teams are going to have standings, or we're going to see emerging teams doing better, and really just get into that season. And then finally, in April, that's when the state tournament happens. And I think we said April 13th, that was the date that we had targeted for that. That's where, between the very end of March and April, we're going to be selecting the teams and giving them plenty of information before that happens. What do you need to expect? Where do you need to go? Et cetera. And that's when that all happens. Does anyone have any questions on the rollout? Pardon me? I think April 13th.
On April 11th through 13th,
Yeah.
that's what we're targeting.
With the state championship, we would expect right now, and again, we can change this, oftentimes when you have the LAN events, it'll run from either Friday to Sunday, or more commonly, what we would do for the schools is Thursday through Saturday. So you would see the students arrive on Thursday. They come and they start playing the games around the tournament. The tournament begins Thursday night, and then over the course of the next 3 days, that's when the tournament is carried out.
Well, interesting. One of the questions that didn't get asked here, as far as games, a lot of the states and a lot of the participants are asking about the sports games, right? The FIFA, the Madden, the 2K, NBA 2K, and things like that. And Andrew's very expert at this, so I know what he told me. But right now for the league competition, right, those games don't play very well online, right? But when we do the LAN events and the LAN parties, the opportunities to have those featured and have those part of the LAN events as well become very, very cool. So for the future, one of the things we're talking about is maybe doing a LAN event in conjunction with the state championship basketball stuff, and doing a LAN event and featuring NBA 2K or things like that, or with the football state tournament or things like that. Anything we can do to, number one, support the initial sports, right, and the tournaments, and gain notoriety and PR and things like that, but also be promoting esports similarly at the same time. So, there's a whole world out here of opportunity for us. We're just at the very first stage. We're at the 5-yard line going out at this point. But there's a world of opportunity, and really appreciate all of your guys' interest and enthusiasm, and in most cases your enthusiasm for what we're trying to accomplish. And when you leave here, make sure that you have Andrew and Scott and Tim's. I'm probably less important in that regard, but have all of their contact information, because really we're here to support you guys. We're here to help you, to help your kids have a great experience through esports. And so as we move forward, we are in full partnership with the AIA and their partner, Outfront Media Sports. We're providing the gaming management and the esports management, but just in conjunction with those guys. So wanting to make it as valuable of an experience for you guys for this first season, but also down the road in the future. And we help this become what it can become. And the people sitting in this room are the ones who are going to be the core kind of point of the spear as we're building that. And so we want to make sure that you feel supported and that you have everything you need to be successful in your individual schools or districts.
That's great. Yeah, any more questions you have, feel free to throw them out. We're at the end of our presentation, and hopefully the most pressing questions have been answered. Yep.
You said at the beginning that we could get a copy of this presentation.
Yes. I will send that directly.
$50.
That's right. That's right. I've got a Stripe on my phone, and you can just give me your credit card, and I'll pass it along. No, I'm going to send it to Brian. I think Brian actually has the copy, and he can send it out directly to the schools. Yep. Along with relevant contact information and any of that information.
You said for November you're planning on sending out guidebooks and stuff like that.
Yes.
So if we haven't yet registered, how are you just sending them free?
So we're right now sending them to schools that have expressed interest in any way directly. And I don't know if you've got a spreadsheet for that. The attendees of this conference are kind of the first.
Yeah, we have all the
there.
information from all of you that registered. So obviously they'll have that contact information. And of course, we'll be sending it out through our channels as well, information and gauging that interest.
So in other words, if we got an email from the AIA to come today, we're on your list, we're good to go, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on the list.
I know for
It'll cost you $25.
I know for other sports and activities in the state, the AIA, that our AIA ran, the schools can use tax credit money to fund, whether it's by paying for the trips students go on to, paying for materials. Are schools going to be able to use tax credits on this as well? Does anyone know?
I would have to ask David or Joe about that. That's not my wheelhouse.
Any other questions around the room? All right, great. We're going to be up here. We're all set here. We'll be up here. If you have any specific questions you want to ask, feel free to come up. I didn't have it there. I'll send it out. Otherwise, thank you guys all for coming. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for the questions.